The moment I stepped into the dimly lit hall, decked out with balloons and banners screaming, Class of .09 reunion, a wave of nostalgia hit me hard. My husband couldn't make it tonight, caught up in a last-minute business meeting, but there I was, swirling in a cocktail dress, feeling a mix of excitement and a twinge of loneliness amidst faces I hadn't seen in years. As I mingled, laughing at old jokes and reminiscing about teenage antics, he caught my eye. My ex. Not just any ex, the first love kind of ex. He was unmistakably changed, his once reckless demeanor now replaced with a polished charm. It was shocking, really, how different he looked, how he carried himself. It stirred something in me, a curious blend of what-ifs and memories of a passion long buried. The night wore on, lubricated by an endless flow of alcohol and the kind of peer pressure only old friends can exert. "It's just a dance," they coaxed, egging me on when he approached, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "For old time's sake," he said, his hand extended, his voice smoother than I remembered. It should have been innocent, it was anything but. Our bodies moved together to a rhythm that felt all too familiar, and before I knew it, his lips found mine in a kiss that ignited a fire I thought had long turned to ash. Around us, the party blurred into a background of cheers and music, but in that moment, we were in our own world, a world that had no place in my married life. The proof of our indiscretion, our moment of weakness, was immortalized by the flashing cameras and phones held aloft by our classmates. The reality of what I'd just done began to seep in, but it was too late. The damage was done, and the evidence was out there, floating in the digital ether, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. He whispered promises of discretion as he led me away, his words weaving a spell that my inebriated mind was all too eager to believe. The drive to his place was a blur, a series of decisions made without thought, each one pulling me further away from the life I knew, the life I had built with my husband. Waking up the next morning, the harsh light of day did nothing to dispel the heaviness in my heart. Lying there, the events of the night replaying in my head, I realized the magnitude of my betrayal. I had crossed a line that once crossed, could never be uncrossed. The guilt was suffocating, a relentless reminder of the choice I had made, a choice that could unravel everything I held dear. I woke up with a start, the unfamiliar surroundings jarring me into consciousness. Panic set in as I realized I was not in my bed, not next to my husband where I belonged. Instead, I lay in a room that screamed of my betrayal, the morning light unforgiving as it highlighted the evidence of last night's mistake. My heart sank as I noticed the spattered clothes, mine and his, a stark reminder of the line I had crossed. Before I could fully process my situation, he was there, phone in hand, showing me a video that made my stomach churn. It was this, intimate in a way that should have been reserved for my husband alone. The sense of betrayal wasn't just to my husband now, it was a deep, searing betrayal to myself. "Please, you have to delete that," I pleaded, the desperation in my voice not entirely for him but for the shards of my conscience as well. "I will," he said, but his tone wasn't reassuring. I didn't wait to see if he would follow through. I gathered my things in a hurry, my mind a blur of regret and fear. "Don't ever contact me again," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but the firmness belied my crumbling interior. I left without looking back, the weight of my actions heavier with each step. The drive home was a blur of tears and rehearsed lies. By the time I reached our doorstep, I had my story ready, a fabrication meant to cover the tracks of my indiscretion. The party went late, and I crashed at Sarah's, I told my husband, avoiding his gaze. He believes me, or at least, he didn't question it further, and the guilt ate me even more. But the reprieve was short-lived. My ex's messages started coming in, each one a dagger reminding me of what I had done. I ignored them, deleted them, but the damage was done. They were imprinted in my mind, a constant reminder of my lapse in judgment. It wasn't long before the whispers started. At first, they were just echoes, rumors on the periphery of my social circle, but they grew louder, more insistent. The party, the dance, the kiss, my actions had become the hot topic among our acquaintances, the subject of speculation and judgment. The final blow came when I learned he had a girlfriend at the time of our encounter. The news added a new layer of guilt to my already heavy conscience. It wasn't just my marriage I had jeopardized, I had unwittingly entangled myself in another relationship's demise. The realization was a bitter pill, each revelation a step deeper into the quagmire of my making. The weight of my choices, the consequences of a moment's lapse, bore down on me, a constant, crushing reminder of the chaos I had invited into my life and the lives of others. The second I heard the turn of the key in the front door, my heart leapt into my throat. My husband, the man I had vowed to share my life with, stood on the threshold of learning about my betrayal. The weight of my decision to come clean pressed down on me with an urgency that made my hands tremble. I knew that what I was about to do could shatter the foundation of our marriage, but the burden of my guilt left me no choice. As he walked in, the air between us felt charged with an unspoken tension. He smiled, the kind of smile that had always felt like coming home. But today, it was a reminder of what I was about to lose. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, betraying the storm of emotions brewing inside me. He looked at me, his brow furrowing in concern at the seriousness of my tone. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting down his keys, unaware that his world was about to be turned upside down. I led him to the living room, each step feeling heavier than the last. "I did something terrible," I started, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I told him everything, the party, the ex, the indiscretion that marked the betrayal. I didn't spare any details, presenting the damning evidence of my infidelity, the photos and messages that left no room for doubt. His reaction was a silent one, a disbelief etched into every line of his face. The silence stretched between us, a gaping chasm that swallowed my apologies whole. I had known his stance on cheating, how it was a deal-breaker, the ultimate betrayal in his eyes. Yet, here I was, confessing to the one thing he couldn't forgive. "Can we talk about this, please?" I pleaded, desperate for any words from him, but he remained silent, the hurt in his eyes speaking volumes. "I need some time," he finally said, his voice hollow. "I need space to process this." With those words, he retreated to our bedroom, leaving me alone with the wreckage of our relationship. The waiting was agonizing, each tick of the clock a reminder of the uncertainty that lay ahead. I had laid bare the worst parts of myself, bracing for the fallout, yet the silence from the other side of the door was a punishment in its own right. I was caught in a limbo, painfully aware that the next conversation we had could very well be the end of our marriage. The silence in our house was deafening. It hung in the air like a thick fog, tangible and suffocating. We moved around each other like strangers, communicating in monosyllables, if at all. The man I had married, whose laughter once filled our home, had become a ghost, his presence marked by the absence of words. I knew he was hurting, and the knowledge that I was the cause of that pain was a constant ache in my chest. A few days after my confession, I noticed he wasn't there one evening. My heart raced with a mix of fear and hope, fear of what his absence signified and hope that maybe, just maybe, he needed time to clear his head and forgive me. When he returned, there was a storm brewing in his eyes, a sign that he had made a decision. "I talked to Mike," he began, referring to his closest friend, someone he turned to in times of crisis. I needed perspective. And, my voice was barely a whisper, bracing for the impact of his words. "I met with your ex," he said, the hardness in his voice making me flinch. I wanted his side, to understand why. I felt sick, imagining the confrontation, the exchange of words, the reopening of wounds. "And what did he say?" "He had more videos, photos. I told him to delete everything. He agreed, eventually." His jaw was set, a muscle ticking in his cheek. The room spun around me. The thought of more evidence of my betrayal out there, in the hands of my ex, was terrifying. But it was the finality in my husband's voice that truly scared me. "I've been thinking a lot," he continued, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond me. "About us, about what we had, and I can't get past this. I can't see you the same way." My heart sank. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying we can't go back. This breach of trust. It's too much." His words were measured, but I could hear the underlying tremor, the effort it took to say them out loud. I had already started seeking legal advice, a part of me knowing it would come to this. Yet, hearing him articulate the decision to separate shattered whatever hope I had clung to. "We need to talk about how to move forward," he said, separately. The word, separately, echoed in my mind, a stark reminder of the consequences of my actions. The realization that I had irrevocably damaged the most important relationship in my life was overwhelming. I had imagined a future with this man, built a home, dreamed dreams. Now, it was all crumbling down, the foundation eroded by my betrayal. As we sat down to discuss the logistics of our separation, the reality of our situation settled in. We were no longer planning a life together, we were negotiating the end of it. From the moment we decided to go our separate ways, every day felt like navigating through a storm. The process of separating our lives, our assets, and our dreams was more painful than I could have ever imagined. We sat across from each other, surrounded by the life we had built together, now reduced to documents and decisions about who gets what. Each conversation was a tightrope walk between civility and the undercurrent of hurt and betrayal. The day I moved out was surreal. Packing up my belongings, I couldn't help but linger on the memories attached to each item, each corner of the home we shared. It wasn't just leaving a house, it was leaving a life behind, a future that would never be. With every box I sealed, a piece of my heart seemed to close off too. I reached out to friends, or at least those I thought were friends, only to find the circle around me had tightened, shrunk by whispers and judgments. The scandal of my actions had preceded me, leaving me isolated when I needed support the most. The realization that my personal failures had bled into my social circle was a bitter pill to swallow. Seeking employment became my next hurdle. My husband's influence in our community and the tarnish of scandal on my name made job hunting an exercise in futility. Each rejection, each closed door, felt like another reminder of the cost of my actions, a price that extended far beyond the confines of my marriage. In the midst of my attempt to rebuild, my ex resurfaced, his intentions as transparent as they were unwelcome. He saw my vulnerability as an opportunity, a chance to rekindle whatever toxic connection we once had. But if there was one clarity amidst the chaos, it was my resolve to never return to that cycle of toxicity. No, I told him, with a firmness that surprised even me. We're done, for good. Therapy became my sanctuary, a place to unpack the baggage of my decisions and confront the traumas that had long influenced my life. It was there, in the quiet of a therapist's office, that I began the slow process of healing, of rebuilding my self-esteem piece by piece. The work was hard, the journey often painful, but it was necessary. Through it, I started to recognize the patterns that had led me down this path, the mix of childhood trauma and poor choices that had culminated in the unraveling of my marriage. Each session was a step towards understanding, towards forgiveness, not just seeking it from those I had wronged, but also offering it to myself. It was in those moments of vulnerability, of facing my own brokenness, that I began to see the faint outline of a path forward, a chance at a future defined not by my past, but by the lessons learned in the person I was still becoming. The moment the divorce papers landed in my hands, it was as though the final chapter of our story had been written, the ink dry, the ending irrevocable. The document was cold, clinical, a stark contrast to the warmth and love that once filled our marriage. It marked the end of what once was a hopeful union, a partnership I had believed would withstand the tests of time. His silence throughout the process was louder than any words could have been. We communicated through lawyers, a once intimate connection reduced to sterile exchanges and legal formalities. The absence of his voice, once a source of comfort and laughter in my life, was a constant reminder of the chasm between us, a gap widened by my actions and his inability to forgive. Receiving the last of my belongings from our shared home was like reopening a wound. Each item, each piece of clothing, each book, was a tangible reminder of the life we shared, of the dreams we had woven together in those walls. Packing them away felt like saying goodbye all over again, not just to him, but to the person I was when we were together. Stepping out into the world post-divorce felt like walking onto a stage, the eyes of the community fixed on me, whispers and stares following my every move. The judgment was palpable, a heavy cloak I couldn't seem to shed, reminding me that my private failings had become public spectacle. In the midst of this turmoil, I found solace in a support group, a circle of strangers who quickly became allies. They were individuals who had walked through fire and emerged on the other side, scarred but standing. Their stories, their strength, and their understanding offered a balm to my bruised heart, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my journey through the aftermath of my choices. Starting a new job was a step towards reclaiming my life, albeit a humbling one. It was a position far removed from the career highs I had once enjoyed, a daily reminder of cost of my actions. Yet, it was also a new beginning, a chance to rebuild from the ground up, to forge a path forward on my own terms. The decision to delete my social media accounts was liberating. In a world where every like and comment can feel like a judgment, stepping away from the constant scrutiny was a breath of fresh air. It was an acknowledgement that while I couldn't control the narrative that had unfolded in the public eye, I could choose not to participate in it, to seek peace and healing away from the prying eyes of a sometimes cruel and unforgiving public. Each step, each action taken since the divorce, has been a step towards a new life, one built on the lessons of the past but not defined by them. It's a journey marked by setbacks and small victories, a path towards healing and redemption, walked one day at a time. The moment I saw him, laughing and carefree with someone new by his side, a sharp pang of reality hit me. It was the visual confirmation of what I already knew: life moves on, with or without us. Watching my husband, now my ex, moving on was a bitter pill to swallow, yet it sparked a determination within me. If he could find a way to step forward into a new chapter, then so could I, no matter how daunting the path seemed. In this spirit of moving forward, I reached out to my estranged parents. Our relationship had been strained, marred by years of misunderstandings and unspoken grievances. The phone call was awkward, hesitant at first, but it broke down barriers I thought were insurmountable. Reconnecting with them wasn't just about seeking support, it was about healing old wounds, understanding, and forgiveness. Their hesitant, but ultimately warm response was a step towards rebuilding bridges I had thought burned too long ago. Meanwhile, the news of my ex's own unraveling reached me. His relationship had ended, and the consequences of his actions were finally catching up with him. There was no satisfaction in hearing of his downfall, only a sad acknowledgement that destructive paths often lead to destruction. It was a stark reminder of the bullet I had dodged, reinforcing my resolve to steer clear of toxic cycles. In search of healing and understanding, I turned to writing. I poured my heart and soul onto pages, documenting the whirlwind of emotions, the mistakes, the lessons learned. Writing became my therapy, a way to process and reflect on my journey. The act of writing was cathartic, transforming pain and regret into something tangible, a map of where I'd been and where I hoped to go. My path to redemption led me to volunteer at a shelter for women facing crises of their own. Sharing my story, lending an ear, and offering support, I found purpose. It was in helping others that I found a piece of myself I thought was lost. The shelter became a place of mutual healing, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there's a light to be found in service to others. Finally, after months of saving and planning, I moved into a small apartment. It was modest, but it was mine, a sanctuary where I could rebuild, reflect, and grow. The space was a physical manifestation of my new beginning, filled with possibilities and the promise of peace. The divorce was finalized with a letter from my husband, a formal end to our shared story. Reading his words, I felt a closure I hadn't realized I needed. It was a goodbye, not just to him, but to the life we shared, to the person I was with him. Standing in my new apartment, I looked to the future with a sense of hope. The journey had been fraught with pain, mistakes, and lessons learned the hard way. Yet, here I was, scars and all, ready to face a new chapter. My downfall had been painful but pivotal, a catalyst for growth and